it's being framed even, upon independent media. There's some people that claim that the multipolarity model is better because it's more inclusive and more countries have a voice. But ultimately, the same 2030 agenda, or Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals embraced by the EU and the Biden administration, what have you, are also embraced by the BRICS countries that are supposed to represent a challenge to the Western order. So maybe there's a few more seats at the table under the multipolar world order, but in terms of the world that will come in through it, it's the same as if the unipolar world order continues on its way, essentially. Larry Fink is in this group too, and he doesn't, to think that he wants to make a more inclusive world is insane. He's interested in increasing the amount of assets that BlackRock manages, and pretty much only that.
The future of money is digital, but not in the way you think. Since the last few years, there has been significant interest in Bitcoin and other digital currencies. People view them as the means of achieving financial liberty and liberation from banks. Since it allows people to build wealth outside the traditional system, the interest in cryptocurrency has been majorly boosted. But what if I told you there's a lot more to it than we know? Have you ever thought about the possibility that a group of ultra-rich people are controlling a huge portion of the world's fortune? What if they were secretly pulling the strings behind Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies? That's what some people have started to think. Today, we will try to analyze this theory more and decide whether it has any degree of truth to it. Whitney Webb, a skilled journalist who loves to unveil the power behind the curtain, she has raised alarm bells pointing out that Bitcoin, originally intended as a decentralized alternative to the world's financial systems, may be falling under the influence of the very institutions it was meant to bypass. When Bitcoin first appeared, it was welcomed as a revolutionary technology. No banks, no middlemen. It was just pure peer-to-peer transactions. It was the first cryptocurrency, and it promised to bring financial independence back to the people. The concept of decentralization from traditional financial institutions appealed to millions, and the revolution of the new digital currencies started. However, as Bitcoin gained popularity, something changed. The financial elite, who were, just by the way, quite dismissive of cryptocurrencies, began to take notice. Major players like Larry Fink of BlackRock and Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase, who were once critical of Bitcoin, started shifting their rhetoric. Fishy? Now they're not only embracing Bitcoin, but also actively integrating it into their financial strategies. Here's where the alarm begins to ring. As Whitney Webb noted, this is not the shift towards embracing financial freedom, but rather the attempt to take control of it. Bitcoin, in its purest form, threatens the very foundation of centralized power. But if you can't kill it, what's the next best option? Control it. Let's start with addressing what BlackRock really is, the world's largest asset manager, handling over $10.5 trillion in assets. BlackRock has a finger in every pie. Real estate, stock markets, bonds, you name it. Now their new target is cryptocurrencies. The CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, has made comments in public about the potential of cryptocurrencies, especially Bitcoin, and how they intend to use it. Their most significant move, the push for a Bitcoin ETF, exchange-traded fund. To the casual observer, this may seem like a natural progression. Bitcoin ETFs provide institutional investors with a way to access Bitcoin without directly owning it. But what's the hidden agenda behind it? Whitney Webb and others have warned that this move is about more than just making Bitcoin accessible to institutional investors. It's about tokenization, a term we're going to hear a lot more about.
The Sustainable Development Goals have been developed essentially by bankers. You could describe it, or I would describe it, as a global Wall Street coup, essentially, but transnational finance. You have people like Mark Carney, former Goldman Sachs, former head of Bank of England, Bank of Canada, Financial Stability Board, aider and abetter of HSBC's money laundering for drug cartels. He's the person that's in charge of climate action for the United Nations. Their other point man is Mike Bloomberg, former Salomon Brothers, former mayor of New York, billionaire guy. And if you think these people care about the environment and sustainable development and building a more inclusive world, I'm sorry, but you have been had. So these are the people that are essentially behind a lot of the net zero plans, behind a lot of the other SDG plans that essentially move us from the model, the free market capitalist model into more this technocratic model where every commodity, everything is going to be tokenized. And you've seen Larry Fink in the past couple of days be very open about that, following the approval of the BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF, for example, talking about the tokenization revolution and all of this. But there's an effort here to take this, much farther than it's ever been taken before, and to essentially just not just tokenize, existing assets or traditional assets, but also create new asset classes like natural assets, all these natural asset corporations that have sort of been in the news lately and have sort of, received some pushback. But there's definitely a lot of efforts underway to essentially tokenize the whole planet, increase the amount of assets in the existing economy by being like, now this lake is an asset, now this forest is an asset, and all of this stuff tokenize, fractionalize it, and basically create this insane new financial system that's different than previous financial systems. But everything, including nature and humans, will be tokenized and traded like financial products.
BlackRock isn't just interested in investing in Bitcoin. Instead, they see it as a stepping stone toward a future where almost everything, real estate, natural resources, even human behavior, can be tokenized and traded like a financial asset. This is how the vision of a decentralized Bitcoin starts to fracture. When BlackRock gains control over Bitcoin's price through ETFs and other financial instruments, it destroys the very idea of decentralization. Bitcoin's value will no longer be determined by market participants only, but by the financial elite who dominate these new tools. So what exactly is this tokenization revolution? Larry Fink has mentioned the idea of tokenizing more than just traditional financial assets. He's looking at things like forests, lakes, and even carbon credits. The concept involves dividing these resources into smaller tradable pieces, similar to how company stocks work. The end goal could be slightly terrifying if we think about it. They want to turn everything, from nature itself to even human labor, into something they can buy, sell, and trade like any other product. The concern? The same institutions and individuals driving this revolution, like those responsible for the 2008 financial crisis, are also responsible for the growing wealth gap. Currently, they are looking at Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. If you think the Bitcoin situation is alarming, it's only a small part of the bigger picture. The move towards central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, is a key part of the financial elite's agenda. Unlike decentralized cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, CBDCs are created and regulated by central banks, giving them complete control over your financial transactions. Once CBDCs are combined with tokenized assets, the ability to track and control every financial transaction will be even simpler. Every purchase, every transfer, and every exchange could be monitored and regulated in real time. Whitney Webb pointed out that this could be the end of financial privacy as we know it. A system where your digital wallet, stocked with tokenized assets, could be frozen or controlled at any moment. In this context, Bitcoin could serve as the prototype, paving the way for CBDCs and the financialization of all assets.
A lot of the way this digital ID stuff, CBDCs or their private sector equivalents, are going to be forced onto the people is when, the food supply is under attack, or, there's some sort of crisis there. And the only way to get your rations is to follow the same model that's been rolled out by the UN's World Food Program, which is essentially the same model produced by Sam Altman's WorldCoin. Scan your eyeball and you have a digital ID tied to your eyeball in a digital wallet. And every time you check out, you scan your eyeball at the cash register, and it deducts the money of the cost of what you purchased from your, rations wallet. And if you don't submit to that system, you don't eat. And the World Food Program does this to millions of refugees every day in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and elsewhere. And the plan is to have this happen essentially everywhere. So people need to be very vigilant.
The elites want you to believe that they are embracing Bitcoin to give you more financial freedom, But in reality, it's part of a strategy to co-opt and control the future of digital currency. With entities like BlackRock and JP Morgan leading the charge, we need to ask, who really stands to benefit? Lately, there's been a growing conversation around the BRICS countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and their interest in Bitcoin. Many people see this as a sign of changing global dynamics, suggesting that we're moving toward a multipolar world where Western countries are no longer the only major players. But Whitney Webb warns against falling for this illusion. Yes, BRICS is challenging the Western financial system, but their end goals, like Agenda 2030, are very similar. Both sides, whether it's the US and EU or Russia and China, seem aligned in moving towards a tokenized global system.
You have most of the countries on the world, those that are pursuing Agenda 2030, essentially leading us into that. And so, at some level, I think the geopolitical push and pull between, BRICS and the West is real. But I think, at the higher levels, they ultimately agree on the goals. So I don't really think one is necessarily a true effective challenge to the other. And if you're against the ambitions of the SDGs and Agenda 2030, then you should be against them regardless of if they're being championed by Russia and China or the United States and the EU. Ultimately, it leads us to the same place. Which is going to financialize and tokenize everything, but also surveil everything to an unprecedented extent, and increasingly uses, debt slavery. The Mark Carney and Fink and all of these guys, under the auspices of the UN, talked about reimagining the World Bank and the IMF, all the multilateral development banks, for the purpose of basically using debt to finance the SDGs and doing all these things like debt for climate swaps, debt for nature swaps, which are essentially, land grabs and all sorts of things, framing it as, necessary to save the planet.
The main concept of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies was to function outside of government regulation, but now they are becoming a part of bigger global governance efforts. Initiatives like the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and net zero policies backed by both Western and BRICS countries are paving the way for a future in which everything is monitored and regulated. Even though there are more people getting involved, the goals of the global elite haven't changed. They're still focused on control, monitoring, and financial power. Bitcoin is just the newest tool they've added to their kit. So, where does that leave us? Should we give up on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies altogether? Not necessarily. Whitney Webb emphasizes that the answer lies in awareness and resistance. The first step is understanding the narrative. Bitcoin can still be a tool for financial freedom, but only if we remain vigilant about how the financial elite is manipulating it.
All the stuff coming out online is increasingly just so psyop after psyop after psyop. And, it's hard to know who to trust and who to believe, what have you. But if you know that the end goal is global governance, mass surveillance, the end of privacy, all of that, you can look at who is pushing those agendas and say no. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to say no. You have to know what your red lines are, and you have to make it about trusting your red lines and trusting where you stand, not so much trusting this political savior or that political savior or this media influencer, which I think a lot of people have been doing. And I think it's definitely time for another model, particularly when it comes to US presidential politics, because how many times can we vote for the lesser of two evils and have a good outcome? It's never happened, and it's not going to keep happening. And, all of these efforts, in the case of Trump, to explain away his decisions last time and act like it's going to be different this time. We can't wait to see what's going to happen this time. The situation has come to a head arguably already, and it's up to people to find local solutions and build something with their communities that will help them help everyone in that community protect themselves against all these stressors and crises that are to come.
The first step is to stay educated and updated on what's happening behind the scenes. Follow independent journalists like Whitney Webb, who are consistently exposing the hidden agendas of major institutions and financial elites. Their investigative work can provide insights that mainstream media might overlook or downplay. The second step is to support decentralized platforms. As centralized financial institutions and governments increasingly seek to control Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, it's crucial to support decentralized platforms. Use decentralized exchanges and wallets that prioritize privacy, autonomy, and financial freedom. The original ethos of Bitcoin. By participating in these platforms, you can help ensure that the vision of decentralized, peer-to-peer financial transactions remains alive. Lastly, we need to push for regulation with caution. While regulations can provide much-needed clarity and stability to the cryptocurrency market, they can also increase control for the financial elite. It's important to advocate for sensible regulations that protect consumers without giving excessive power to centralized institutions. Be cautious of regulations that can restrict financial freedom or allow elites to dominate the crypto landscape further. Once a small-scale movement of tech enthusiasts and libertarians, Bitcoin now sees interest from the largest financial institutions. This shift didn't happen overnight, but it's accelerating. By 2024, institutional ownership of Bitcoin has climbed dramatically. According to recent reports, institutional investors now control 7% of the Bitcoin supply, with Block 1, the Tezos Foundation, Mt. Gox, and Stone Ridge Holdings Group leading the charge. While this figure might not seem overwhelming, consider what this 7% represents. Billions of dollars that institutions can use to exert pressure on the market. Institutional ownership, through ETFs, futures, and custodial services, increases volatility, and their influence allows them to manipulate Bitcoin prices behind closed doors. As more of the asset becomes centralized in the hands of these power brokers, it becomes difficult for the average investor to make meaningful gains or maintain control. The issue goes beyond just who owns Bitcoin. With BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF getting the green light, we're seeing the rise of a new wave of financial products aimed at giving the elite even more control and influence. ETFs sound innocent enough. They allow for easier access to assets by breaking them down into tradable shares. However, Whitney Webb argues that ETFs can act as leverage tools for the elite to control asset flows, suppress volatility, and ultimately control the market. Let's take Larry Fink's statements as an example. Fink once dismissed Bitcoin as a tool for money laundering, but in 2023, he shifted to calling it the future of finance. This should raise alarms. If BlackRock is jumping on the Bitcoin train, it's not out of a belief in decentralization. The motivation is control. The firm's $10.5 trillion under management dwarfs entire national economies, meaning BlackRock's decisions shape global financial markets. Its move into Bitcoin signals a deeper plan, which is to make Bitcoin another cog in the financial machine controlled by a few. In conclusion, Whitney Webb's analysis paints a clear picture. Sure, what was once a symbol of freedom in finance is slowly succumbing to the control of the same entities it wished to topple. The surge of institutional interest, the demands for ETFs, the overall tokenization narrative, and the potential encroachment of CBDCs signal that power will continue to reside in the elite's hands. This is not a call to abandon Bitcoin, but a call to be vigilant. The potential for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies to offer financial freedom still exists, but only if we remain aware of the forces trying to control them. The financial elite have shown time and again that their primary interest is not in empowering the individual, but in maintaining and expanding their control over global markets. The elite's master plan behind Bitcoin is becoming clearer with every new move by institutions like BlackRock. The same people who brought the world to the brink of economic collapse in 2008 are now positioning themselves as the gatekeepers of the future of digital currency. But as Whitney Webb has warned, the more centralized control we allow, the further we drift from Bitcoin's original purpose. The financial elite may be able to shape the narrative, but it's up to us to recognize the red flags and fight for the freedom that Bitcoin was meant to provide. As the future of money unfolds, the question remains, will Bitcoin be a tool for financial liberation or just another asset under the control of global elites? The future of money may be digital, but the fight for freedom is far from over. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and keep pushing for a world where financial freedom remains in the hands of the people. Thank you for watching.